meat on the bone. Any questions or comments from either of the staff members on this?
Mr. Chairman, I would just...
Mr. Johnson has a question.
I would just maybe reinforce something that Kristen said, and it's sort of attached in your attachment, but through their recent planning activities, the TCA, either inadvertently or on purpose, it's unclear, has reopened a number of project decisions that the OCTA board has already made through our South County Major Investment Study or through your long-range transportation planning process, or promised new activities or projects that, again, have already been screened out. So that has created some of the confusion. And a simple example, two simple examples. One is this board long ago said we're not going to put two rail tracks south of Laguna Niguel along the beach in San Clemente. That's on the record multiple times, and they proposed something like that. So that created confusion with residents there. And then recently, with our opening of the HOV lane between San Juan Capistrano and Pico, that was viewed as perhaps converting that to a toll lane at some future point, which may or may not be a good idea, but it was proposed prior to us opening it, and it's fully funded with Measure M2, which is inconsistent with the voter referendum and ordinance. So those are two examples, recent examples, of some of that confusion that Ms. Essner related to. So I wanted to just give that background at that point.
Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. Director Winterbottom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did we have contact with them while these issues were ongoing? In other words, were they discussing it with us, what we were planning, or was it sort of just a perfunctory move?
Through the chairman, I think we have had ongoing communication and meetings with TCA staff, and we've filed our objections to some of those things in writing as much as a year ago. Some they acknowledged and some they did not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Director Shaw.
Just to be really clear, so AB 382, would it preclude extending the 241 south to connect to the 5? Does this bill make it impossible?
Through the chair, there is still existing tolling authority under state law provided under AB 194 by Assemblymember Frazier, which is the authority we are using to construct the 405 express lanes. That bill also authorizes regional transportation agencies and Caltrans to construct a toll road, which could theoretically be the State Route 241 extension south.
I mean, someone might think, well, this was a bill to kill the 241 south, and if we are on record supporting it, we're going to be seen as people trying to stop that project. But that's not necessarily true, is it?
Through the chair, no. It would limit the TCA's ability to extend the 241, but the 240 doesn't kill the 241 in itself, because at that point in time, the regional planning agency, which is OCTA, and Caltrans could, if decide to do something along those lines, could plan and construct that road.
Yeah, and so
I think that's an important point.
But the extension is in the master plan for the LA region at SCAG, so it's qualified for funding. And the polite way to say this, Director Shaw, is, perhaps the TCA has been, its best self-fulfilling prophecy that the 241 won't get extended. They haven't built a road in 20 years. And what would be better? Is 30 a better number? I don't know. Maybe 40. Meanwhile, I think what you've seen is there's a lot of cooperation regionally in getting projects done. Perhaps they've just gotten to a point where they are not the best agency to complete the 241, but that doesn't mean that facilities can't be built. And I think it would be a reasonable argument that whatever the outcome there, yes, there can still be a 241. And the real question is, what are they doing focused on all this other stuff? I mean, what is wrong with this agency that they cannot get focused? The one task that they were tasked with completing has completely befuddled them for 20 years. They spent $210 million in advocacy. Let that sink in for a minute, right? The definition of insanity is what exactly?
Doing the same thing over.
Same group of people, same thing. This is an endless slot machine. And like the high-speed rail, I guarantee you there is a small core of people that are 100% for continuing this, and they're all getting paid. So absent that group, in fairness, just the objective sort of leadership has to give a fair analysis. And the fair analysis is, what is a toll agency that's tasked with connecting the 241 to the 5 doing planning double track rail? I mean, it makes as much sense as RCTC planning this. Actually, probably a little less because RCTC is at least involved in rail. It's offensive. They repeatedly have proven they are tone deaf, they don't learn lessons, and they are clearly not focused on completing their task and not capable of completing their task. So whatever the outcome is, if we want a 241, help me understand if 20 years isn't the answer. When do we finally say, you are not the group that's best suited to do this? If 30 is a better number, then let's wait 30. I would suggest that if you haven't had anything done in 10, we should probably start asking at least different questions. We haven't. And I don't think we ever will. There's no evidence that there'll be new questions asked other than there's clearly, an extraordinary mission creep when they start getting into the 5 freeway. What was the TCA created to do? And what, if anything, does it have to do with the 5 freeway other than tying in south of San Clemente? Nothing. They're not Caltrans. They're not the regional transit agency. But when you tell them this, they don't want to hear it. And this is unfortunately, a misbehaving child, and we've talked to him, and we're just going to have to start taking some privileges away. From my perspective, the gentleman that came up and pushed for a support position, I don't know how we can, in good conscience, knowing the things they've tried to do to take over this agency's responsibility, it's our responsibility to make sure that these projects don't get into this morass and let someone totally incapable of running a project touch any of these things. How many miles of roadway have we built or have under construction on the freeway system in the last 8 years, Mr. Johnson?
Since 1991, we've spent about $12 billion. In the last decade, it's been about $2 billion, and probably
with another $2 billion to go on the books with Mr. Beal, formerly from Caltrans, leading the effort. If there's going to be a road built, who realistically should be building the road in Orange County from a government standpoint? Who hasn't built any road in 20 years? This whole thing makes no sense. And if TCA was capable of doing this, at least they would have focused their last 20 years on planning, not consultants, not road building, because they haven't had a road to build. They would have focused on how to cobble together a team to plan this roadway and pick a route. And all they've done is make enemies and invigorate them. And that is not a winning combination for anyone, not for the citizens, not for our agency, not for people in San Diego and Orange County trying to traverse. It's just an embarrassment. And yes, I am on the board, and no, I have not been to a meeting in 3 years. This is a complete waste of time. We went there and talked about tolling and all this other nonsense. This agency runs the 91 freeway. Kirk and his team do a great job. We spend 15 minutes a year. That's how long it takes to be in the property management business of a toll road. Yet they have 2 boards that meet constantly, talk about nothing, get zero done, and just churn a bunch of fees, spend a bunch of money on consultants, and have nothing to show for it except for angry residents and lawsuits. And if this doesn't beg for our agency to support, then just tell me what would.
Mr. Chair?
Director Murray, what do you know about fishing?
I know a little bit about fishing and quite a bit about TCA. I had the unique history of working with 2 gentlemen who were former CEOs there, Mr. Bill Willett, former city manager for the city of Irvine, and also Wally Kreitzen, who was the assistant city manager at Irvine. And having had numerous conversations with them, you're absolutely right, and the 2 gentlemen that spoke earlier were correct, and that it is a tolling agency, and that was its primary purpose. And we used to talk about other things, and I guess what you call mission creep, way back when, 15, 20 years ago. And Bill and Wally said, no, this is what we're focused on. I've also had the unique opportunity to sit on TCA. And for many of the same reasons that Mr. Nelson mentioned, I passed it on to one of my colleagues. OCTA, I think, is where other projects need to be. And from a regional efficiency standpoint, I really totally agree that we should be supporting AB 382. And with that, I would like to make a motion to support AB 382. And I know some of my colleagues probably have some additional comments, but I think for the reasons mentioned by Mr. Bain and also Mr. Hadlin, as well as some of my historical background and having sat on TCA, that would be my motion to support AB 382. Thank you.
Excellent. I'll second that. Director Dalglish.
Thank you, Chair. You both of you gentlemen are so articulate. I'm not going to be supporting 382. As a person on this committee and a member of OCTA, I couldn't be more proud to serve. However, I also am a realtor during the day and night. And I know there's 15,000 new homes being built in Rancho Mission Viejo. If there is an emergency in South County, there is no access if Freeway 5 is blocked. So until someone can show me that there's another alternative,
It's La Pata.
I'm not
It's the
willing to
alternative.
take
It's
the
already
TCA
built.
focus off the books. So anyway.
OCAR
So noted.
is
Any
in
other
TCA's
comments?
pocket,
Don't
so
leave anyone out. I'm
she's
sorry,
one
Director
of
Davis.
them.
I'm telling you by myself.
Bought and paid.
But perhaps this is a question for Mr.
Potentially.
Johnson. I see that the OCT has taken a non-position on this. Could you explain why you were going that route?
Through the chair, Director Davies, I think two points. One is, as Ms. Essner indicated around their internal financials, that's really not something that we as a staff should be mucking with, was said over here. You know, they have a debt structure, and we don't have the details on that. So that's really what gave us the neutral position, if you will. With that, we also recognize that we have members that sit on both boards, and we wanted to be careful of that. With that said, I think the planning function is very important, and if I could just link to Director Shaw's question, you know, in 2008, the OCTA board adopted the South County Major Investment Study, and that looked at a comprehensive set of transportation solutions in South Orange County, and we've completed 85% of that. So if this were to make its way go forward, and to your question, what would happen next? We would look at what the transportation needs are in South Orange County and propose a set of solutions that would probably include highway solutions, local arterial solutions, perhaps toll solutions, perhaps rail and bus solutions, but we would prioritize those the way we do for every other part of the county and talk to this committee and the board about those. So if the solution was needed was a controlled access toll road and the data supported that, we would come back and we would talk about that. So it doesn't take that off the books, but it does put it into a more comprehensive planning. So that's the part we really think is very clear. And my examples earlier of those confusion of rail and highway and things of that nature, I think is problematic. But our position really on the neutral piece was really around their internal finances, which we're not privy to all of their internal details on that.
Director Nelson, if I may, I'd like to make a substitute motion and stay with the OCTA position of none.
All right. I'm on all kinds of different boards and committees that we don't take substitute motions, but assuming we take them here, we will go ahead and vote on that. Then I have some other comments, but we have a motion and a second. So why don't we say I'm opposed
To the substitute.
to the substitute motion.
Opposed.
Yeah, obviously we have a motion, a second. Are there any opposed? I'm 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that motion fails. And let me just articulate this. Director Delgado, I have so much respect for you, and you hit the nail on the head. And that's exactly the problem that I think the TCA has created. Because they're only a toll road agency, they even know now that really, if, maybe we can get this 241 through. I hope we can. But in the meantime, what are the other alternatives? And perhaps I have nothing but respect for City San Clemente, and they are clearly a player in this. But a lot of their off ramps, some of those roads go up in the hills. I don't know if there's a reasonable way to start connecting those roads over the hill. It's not a 241, but in an emergency, if you had to shut down intersections and just evacuate people or something, that would be an alternative.
Was just built.
What agency is the appropriate agency to look at the global solution, which appears to need some serious work right now? And that's what got me to this point. It's not that we don't need a solution. I've just been convinced beyond any ability to be convinced that the TCA can't do it. And it's 20 years of complete futility. And really, I don't know that they're not worse off 20 years later than they were 20 years ago. I think they had some momentum 20 years ago, and it was, hey, we got to deal with the surfers, and we kind of got to work this out. And in 20 years, now you've got the whole city of San Clemente ready to, show up. The TCA meetings used to be pretty mundane. Nobody showed up. I mean, you had a few, observers, and now you got the city ready to burn the building down. So, it's you are right. And if all it is a disagreement on how to get there, then that's all it is. I just want you to know you absolutely are correct in the need for a solution. My objective is how do we help the citizens that deserve some help? And after 20 years, that's just, I don't believe the answer. And I think if we were able to change the focus of the conversation and maybe put another group in charge somehow of having these discussions, not without sort of this distraction, I just think we'd get further. Maybe I'm wrong. Yes.
And with great respect for the city of San Clemente and its residents, I have no interest in having a road come through the city. I do believe with the great minds that we have that focus on a lot of this, we didn't get to where we are today without having good planning. I just really believe there is a solution. It doesn't necessarily have to be San Clemente. I don't know what it is today. But I would be happy. I'm not going to change my vote today. What I'd be happy to is work with people going in the future and seeing what's really the best way. And if it's OCTA, I couldn't be more proud because I'm already on the board, and I just think we are an amazing agency. But until I know the answer to that, I appreciate your comments,
not
Chair.
a financial
Yeah,
drain
thank you.
for golf and the
Anything
rest
further?
of it.
If I may, I'm going right back to you, Mr. Johnson. You'd given us some reasons why you were taking a non-issue basically on this. If you were to make an amendment to, if this was yours and you were to make an amendment to it with the understanding of why you would take in that position, what would that amendment be to this bill?
Understanding I don't get to vote, you guys
Right.
get to vote.
No, but I'm just.
But I
But
think
I take staff's I take that very seriously.
I think maybe two things. One is just for Director Delglaze, there's a number of roadways that have been improved around the Rancho Mission Viejo plant. Las Patrones was part of that program that's opened. OCTA helped fund a significant portion of La Pata, and the board directed us to finish the widening of Ortega. So I think, I'll not speak on behalf of the ranch, but I think they understand what the roadway network is there and from their housing perspective. But I think if to your question, Director Davies, the important part for OCTA for this agency is the planning component. So if there is an amendment there, it would be probably something along the lines of support with amendments, or something that we support the planning process piece, but we don't have the information around their finances. Now I recognize Director Nelson, you sat on their board, Director Shaw, Murray sat on their board, maybe have some thoughts on the finances. We have a basic understanding of it, but that's an area that we don't have a lot of comfort with. So it would be around those areas that we would maybe back off from, but very focused on, I think the planning really needs to be clarified, and that's the important part of the bill from the staff perspective.
Thank you.
Be aware if you hold TCA stock.
A quick question. Is there another way to accomplish that without having a bill in Sacramento?
I think we've been working on that for a number of years, and the fact that we still have a planning process that is attempting to get underway, that is planning on things like I described a moment ago, for whatever reason that message has not been heard properly.
Right, and that's a very polite way of saying, well, I mean, we all get what he means. Anyone that cares to be bored with the TCA finance issue, I'd be happy to stick around afterwards, but let's not go there for now. I'll just leave you with this. They did not have to refinance $2 billion in refinancing, and the roads would have been available to the public for free, I think now within 10 years. The main thrust, the argument when I was in the room that we absolutely have to refinance these roads is because they weren't meeting their debt covenant and they wouldn't be able to finance the 241. So now that the public is 30 years away from ever driving on those roads for free because of this completely made up reason, Because if they ever actually got through the 241, everyone I talked to that had Wall Street connections to transportation funding said that would fund itself. I mean, that's where all the traffic is. So it would be irrelevant. It would be a standalone. And now you have all this debt. You have no ability for your residents. I mean, they're my friends, but they're your residents. Drive these roads for free, and it's all because they refinanced. They didn't need to. They had no obligation to meet their debt covenants. That's what the risk is when you issue the bond issuance. You know, that's what the whole calculation is based on.
2 years ago.
And there was no obligation for the agency to max out their credit card. Worse, the bonds sell at a discount because they're distressed. And that happens every day. And, could have happened again. But the residents' chance to get what they were promised, which was those free roads, was lost because of total fiction.
Mismanagement.
And clearly they haven't built the road. I mean, that sales pitch was, Pat Bates was still on the board then. It was probably 5 years ago, maybe 4. We're 4 years in and just extended the life and paying a lot of fees and not sure what we got out of that. But
nothing.
Anyway, there's a
headache,
motion and a second. Any further
lost.
comments from anyone in the group? Opposed? 2. All right, that passes 4-2. Director Hennessy absent.
Thank you.
All right, I know there are
Thank
further
you,
items
Shawn
on this,
Nelson.
so why don't we continue with the balance